So when I first started gardening, I went to the hardware store, bought some lumber, built some raised beds, and have been making them that way ever since. It's pretty simple, it's pretty basic, but they've never failed me. So I want to show you how I've been making these raised beds for years, since I was a kid, and I'm making them for less than $65. So before we start building our raised bed, we need to talk a little bit about what kind of materials we can build them with. In the lumber world, there is untreated lumber, which of course can rot and decay very quickly. Of course, you can build a raised bed from this, but it's not going to last you very long. Then there's the treated lumber, which has material added to it to help it become rot and decay resistant. And then of course the last option is going to be naturally occurring wood products like cedars that do have rot resistance and decay resistance already in their chemical compounds. But you will find that the cedar products have a quite higher price tag. All right, now I know that treated lumber has gotten a bad rap, or at least people think that maybe this kind of wood would poison our crops. And before 2004, very well could have. Before 2004, people were using arsenic and chromium in order to protect lumber from decay and rot, but not anymore. Right now, we notice that many of these treated lumber products are made from a micronized copper azole, and you'll see it on the tag here. You'll see micronized copper azole. This does seem to be one of the safest treatments that is available in the lumber industry. As a matter of fact, if any copper is leached from the lumber itself into the soil, if your pH is around 6 to 8, that copper is tied up tightly to the soil, and of course the plants can't even use it. Of course, plants do need a certain amount of copper in order to grow. It's a micronutrient after all, so a little bit is not a problem. What else do we do with copper? Well, we spray it on our leaves as a fungicide to protect against rot and decay of the foliage itself. So if you're worried about using lumber that's been treated in your raised beds, do some research first and make sure that you see MCA on the lumber tag, micronized copper azole. So I will be using an MCA treated lumber to build these raised beds. Number one, it's going to last me a long time, which means my $65 is going to go a long ways. And for these raised beds to work, we really only need 4 boards of lumber. Number one, we need 3 2x10 by 8s and 1 2x4 by 8. That's all. All right, so here's the plan. I always buy 3 boards of lumber. Now, of course, a raised bed can be as long as you like. However, it's always a good idea to keep the width down to maybe 3 or 4 feet. So I buy 3 boards of lumber, and I'll always bisect one of them. Just make one cut down the middle of one, because the first piece of lumber and second piece of lumber will be our sides. And then, of course, the board that I dissected or bisected is going to be the end caps. So I will have, because I have 8-foot lumber, I will have short ends at 4 feet and long ends at 8 feet. And that's pretty much it. We'll attach those with screws, add some corner braces with the other 2x4, and we'll be good to go. Now, as far as the cost breakdown, each one of these 2x10 by 8s cost me about $15, maybe $15, $17 with tax. So there's that. And then, of course, I promised you we have one more board that's going to be a 2x4 by 8. And that baby only cost me about $5.54. You add all that together, plus we do need 1 pound of screws to make this box. We'll have plenty of left over for the next box you may want to make. But a pound of screws cost me $11.74 with tax, and that totals to about $62.79. Pretty cheap, and it's going to last us for many years to come. Now, before we start measuring and cutting things, I do want to make a few notes about the screws you choose to use. Of course, because we'll be drilling these babies into wood where moisture levels can fluctuate, an untreated or uncovered screw that's not been painted like a decking screw may quickly rust and fall apart. So you may look into the Cadillac stainless steel, or I just go for these simple decking screws that have been coated in paint that will last me much longer than any screw that might have been untreated. Now, there will be one step at the end of today's video that actually increases the budget a little bit. You don't have to go this route in order to have a functioning raised bed, but I'm going to show you why I add that extra step and a little more cost. It's good for functionality for me, and it's also convenient. And now for the building. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the swing here in the garden and let the B-roll do all the work. Here's how it goes. So like I mentioned before, the first thing that I do is take one of my 2x10x8s and cut it in half. I'll find the middle of the board and slice it right down the center. Then I'll take those two as the end pieces for my raised bed and attach them with some of the decking screws to form the sides. Then I simply cut the 2x4x8 into pieces that are the height of the 10-inch board, add them to the corner to give them some good bracing. And then that's about as much as we have to do. So for a less than $65 raised bed, that's all you've got to do. However, I do like to take this next step to add a little ledge to the raised bed so that I can sit, maybe kneel on as I'm working it, but we do add a frame around the top of this bed and then of course some extra supports on the outside to hold that frame up. It's basically just trim, and trim work just makes things look a little nicer. But of course, the trim work is more than just for aesthetics. It's also functional because I can rest my tired onions when I've been working in the raised bed garden. Well, that may be it for the construction part of these raised beds, but the next step, of course, is to level them, place them where they get 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day if you're growing vegetables, and then lastly, fill them with some nice, rich organic matter planting soil. If you are interested in how I filled some of these raised beds in a modified hugelkultur manner, be sure to check out this video because I tell you all about it. It's a good way to get rid of a lot of broken branches and things like that. Of course, you can purchase planting mix that's perfect for raised beds. Of course, you can make it yourself if you have a great compost bin. You can use the existing soil that's underneath this raised bed and incorporate copious amounts of organic matter. As long as you have a material that is well draining but holds on to some moisture, you'll have some great growing vegetables. So gang, that is how I have been building relatively inexpensive but highly useful and long-lived raised beds since I was a kid, and I hope that this style of raised bed helps you to grow vegetables, perennials, annuals, whatever you're growing for many years to come. So if you found this video helpful, I hope that you like it. Maybe leave us a comment, and of course subscribe to New Southern Garden so you can get all the gardening goodness that's to come. Oh, and be sure to check out the New Southern Garden podcast that comes out weekly at newsoutherngarden.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Well, stay well and grow well. We'll see you next time.